General Lee, I see that you are precisely on time, sir.
I make it one of my priorities to be punctual.
Of course, of course. I have left my staff officers on the grounds. I see you are also alone.
Indeed.
I'm glad. I hope we might have these few moments in private before concluding our business.
Yes, our business. Yes, I think we could benefit from some conversation.
Shall we sit, sir? I met you once before, General Lee, at a time when we fought on the same side. We were serving in Mexico. You were with General Scott, and you once visited Garland's brigade, to which I then belonged. I have always remembered your appearance. I think I should have recognized you anywhere.
Yes, I know that I met you on that occasion. I've often thought of it and tried to recollect how you looked, but for the life of me, I've never been able to recite a single feature. I wish to appreciate, you, sir, this letter that you sent to me regarding our surrender. The results of the last week must convince you of the hopelessness of further resistance on the part of your forces in this struggle. I feel that it is so and ask of you the surrender of that portion of the Confederate States Army known as the Army of Northern Virginia, signed U.S. Grant, Lieutenant General. I do not agree about the hopelessness of our situation, and I submit that you may be wrong, sir, but I completely agree that too much blood has been spilt. It is time that we finally bring an end to these proceedings.
My thoughts exactly. Your men have fought bravely.
No blame can be placed upon the men, sir. I alone am to blame for any failures.
The man in charge always shoulders the blame when he loses and the fame when he wins.
Your men have also comported themselves well.
On their behalf, I thank you, sir. I have lost many more men than I might have had the conditions of this war not been so demanding.
Each soldier's life is precious, General. But the truth is, the northern armies have always had more men to lose than the Confederacy had to fight.
And yet there has been report that you had recently devised plans to rectify your shortage of manpower.
I'm afraid I don't catch the drift of your meaning, sir.
Come, General Lee. Our intelligence has it that as recently as a few months ago, you intended on using slaves as soldiers.
Well, your intelligence is wrong, sir. A slave will not fight for those who enslave him. But I must admit the report has some validity. My plan was not to use slaves as soldiers. My plan was to free those slaves who would train to be soldiers. But my plan was rejected by my government.
Well, it was a bold plan. I wonder if it would have helped your cause. Raw recruits.
I can make a soldier out of any man with 2 arms and 2 legs, General, but would it have made a difference? Your armies were simply too large. Only the Almighty will ever know.
The North has a much greater population to draw upon. Still,
sir,
I will be frank. I lost many more soldiers than I might have had I used other tactics. War is not subtle.
Certainly not the way you waged it.
Subtlety is a luxury I was not allowed. I do not complain, sir, nor do I claim I would have acted differently. President Lincoln insisted that this war be drawn to a swift conclusion. Others before me had failed to do so.
Yes, Mr. Lincoln sent a long line of failures against me. General McClellan at Antietam, Pope at Manassas, Burns at Fredericksburg, and Hooker, for instance.
All of those men, they were nothing but foppish fools. They couldn't fight their way out of a burlap bag. It was criminal the way they led their troops. Those battles will forever be remembered as nothing less than bloodbaths. 4 years it has gone on. 4 years of state against state, cousin against cousin, brother against brother.
I know, sir, I know. And through it all, I have mainly prevailed until now. Until you, General Grant. You say that you are not subtle, and that is true. You have used the hammer of your armies to crush the South. And one of those hammers, sir, was General William Tecumseh Sherman, A tool I wish that you had left in your toolbox, sir.
Sherman. The man is less subtle than me, even. His orders were to wage a campaign right across the heart of the Confederacy and to rip that heart out. Because I knew that once your heart was gone, it would only be a matter of time before the rest of the body would topple as well.
The reports of the destruction he left in his wake is enough to stagger the mind of any sane man. He burned everything, every building, every factory, every farm, every field.
War is hell. That is what Sherman says. War is hell.
Certainly it was, wherever he laid his hand to the enterprise. But this is a new kind of war we have waged, General Grant. Our forefathers could never have dreamed of the amount of carnage that we have been able to inflict upon each other. The sheer numbers of the dead and dying, the horribly wounded that we left on every battlefield. You were not at Gettysburg. Pickett's charge at Cemetery Hill will forever haunt my waking memory. 50,000 men. 50,000 dead and wounded in 3 days.
No, sir. No, sir, I was not at Gettysburg. But I commanded at Shiloh. My losses at Shiloh. The newspapers would not tolerate them. They called for my head. Yet I am still here.
No war since this war has been capable of slaughter on this magnitude.
We have new weapons, sir. The repeater rifle alone has changed forever the way that man will conduct warfare. And the accuracy of our mortars and cannons is astounding. I compared to the ancient firearms.
The Gatling gun is the devil's spawn, spurring out death at every turn, like the grim reaper. If your northern forces had used more of those weapons, you could have defeated us possibly years ago.
Yes. A rifle that fires like a machine, capable of 400 rounds per minute. Who could stand up against such an onslaught? Yes, I grant you, the Gatling gun is particularly horrible.
But it's not simply the weapons that are new now, sir. Take, for instance, the railroad.
No. Now there, you have put your finger on it, sir. Our armies may still march like the
Europeans.
Europeans.
Will always march, General. That can never be changed.
Yes,
it will always be the same.
But with the railroads to move munitions and supplies, we would have had greater obstacles to overcome.
Yes. Well, your man Sherman certainly proved that. I defy you to find 2 rails across all of Mississippi, Alabama, or Georgia. There are no Confederate trains running now.
Southern railroads were the primary target of his campaign.
Well, he could have left some of the secondary targets, do you not think?
I think the telegraph was as important as the trains. Transmitting information almost instantaneously. At another time, the instantaneous transmission of messages would probably have been attributed to witchcraft. I still find it almost miraculous.
Imagine if one could communicate like that in the heat of battle. How many battles have been won? How many battles have been decided for good or ill due to lack of knowledge, not knowing where a troop is located or how it is faring? But it's not only the new weapons, General. We are spread out over far greater distances.
Yes, and the distant rear of an army during a battle is not the best place to judge what is happening in the front.
Yes, things happen so swiftly.
I agree. Now think what an advantage it would be to have some sort of telegraph right on the battlefield.
A telegraph whose wires the enemy could not cut.
Oh, that would be a powerful advantage indeed. As it is, during a battle, only the newspaper men reap the benefit of the telegraph. It is a new day, sir. The days of lancers and valiant cavalry charges may soon be a faint memory.
We have learned to kill very well, have we not?
War is hell. You, sir, you are a different breed. You understand warfare better than any officer in my command ever did. Maps and the compass are your tools. You use the horsemen in your cavalry the way that a chess master uses his knights. You are a strategist, not a butcher. May I ask a question, General, if you will permit a personal inquiry?
You have the right to ask anything, sir. I refuse the right to answer or not.
When this war began, I was a brigadier. I was made brigadier general. I had retired from the Army after the Mexican-American War.
Ah, fine war. A good campaign, one I was proud to have been a part of.
I agree, but to my question.
Sir.
Unlike me, you stayed in the Army. Your reputation grew to the point that it was almost legendary. From your first days at West Point, it was obvious that you were destined for greatness. So much so that when the war began, President Lincoln offered you, a Virginian, command of the Union Army.
I don't know about my legend, sir, but it is true. Mr. Lincoln offered me the post.
Then my question is simply this. Why did you turn him down? Why did you walk away from the greatest glory and honor that a military man could ever ask for? I have always wanted to know why you chose to fight against the country you had sworn to protect.
You were born in Ohio, were you not, General Grant?
Well, yes, that is correct, in a small town on the banks of the Ohio River. Why do you ask?
So your family is from Ohio, then?
Well, no. My parents came from Pennsylvania. Before that, I'm not really sure. Somewhere back further east, I reckon. To be truthful, I've never given my ancestors much thought. I suppose the Grants have always looked to what was on the horizon and less to where we had been.
My father was General Light Horse Harry Lee. You may have heard of him.
Of course. He was one of the heroes of the Revolutionary War.
He was also governor of Virginia. Were you aware of that? His father was also General Harry Lee of Virginia. And his cousin was Richard Henry Lee, 6th President of the Continental Congress and one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. My great-great-grandmother of Virginia was an aunt to Thomas Jefferson.
I failed to see.
My great-grandfather, Captain Henry Lee, was of Virginia. My great-great-grandfather, Richard Lee, also of Virginia. You would have to go back to my great-great-great-grandfather, Richard Lee, to find a Lee who was not born in Virginia.
I don't understand what
This is a young country general.
87 years, to quote the president. 87 years does not seem terribly young.
2 generations. 2 generations of men and women. That is how old this country is, sir. The Lees of Virginia go back 5 generations, sir. I opposed secession. I considered it nothing less than revolution. I still think it is wrong-headed. That I could no more have fought against Virginia than I could have fought against my own sons. That is why I refused Lincoln. Make of it what you will, sir.
I see. You and I are very different men, General Lee.
It seems so.
We have come to our destinies by very different roads and for very different reasons.
And yet we find ourselves at the end of it all, together here in this small Virginia village, Appomattox Courthouse. Strange how things have a way of playing themselves out.
That is something that I find peculiar. When we agreed by messenger to meet at Appomattox Courthouse, I expected to find, well, a courthouse, someplace suitable to the gravity of purpose that this meeting entailed. Instead, we find ourselves in a farmhouse. Now, I do not wish to insult Mr. McLean's generosity in permitting us to meet here, but
This is a very sturdy farmhouse, sir, and I should hope to still be standing after all the fighting we've done around and about it.
yes, but it is nevertheless not a government building. I do not understand why, if it is called Appomattox Courthouse, well, there is no courthouse.
It is the name of the town, sir. It is the custom. Oftentimes in these parts, whenever a village or a town is named the county seat, they simply tack on the words courthouse to the end of the name. Therefore, Appomattox becomes Appomattox Courthouse.
And the real courthouse?
Did not fare as well as Mr. McLean's farmhouse, I'm afraid. Casualties of battle, General.
Yes. the casualties of battle. To your health, sir.
Where do you get your whiskey, General? If I might say so, it would seem you would need a fairly steady supply.
Well, it helps me keep a clear head. It's difficult enough living in a tent, day on end, summer and winter. Whiskey serves to clarify my vision. It allows me to survey the battlefield with a godlike eye so that I may direct my forces in the keenest manner possible.
I dare say it dampens the screams of the dying as well.
Yes. Yes, it does that as well. So many. So very, very many. My thirst is the unquenched thirst of the dogs of war, sir. And I thank God that he saw fit to invent this elixir. Where do I get my whiskey? Kentucky. Thankfully, as a border state, it is still possible to obtain Kentucky bourbon even in the South.
Well, they make a very fine whiskey in Kentucky.
You know what Lincoln said about my drinking? Some tomfool bureaucrat came to him grousing about my drinking. This was after me winning some great battle or another. This Washington busybody complained to Lincoln that a man with my habits had no place at the head of an army. He pronounced me idle, incompetent, and unfit to lead men in an emergency, and he demanded my removal. And what do you suppose Lincoln said to him? Tell me what brand of whiskey that Grant drinks. I would like to send a barrel of it to my other generals. Now, how's that for seeing the sense of things?
It seems to me that Abraham Lincoln has a great ability to see the sense of things and to know sense from nonsense.
Your president, Jefferson Davis, he is from Mississippi, yes?
Yes.
I confess I do not know much about the man, though he seems to be a decent sort.
Like myself, President Davis opposed secession. But when Mississippi ceded, he went with her. He is an ardent believer in states' rights.
Ah, yes. States' rights. An issue debated endlessly. Though it seems to me that the issue has been decided.
It has?
You are here to surrender, are you not? That pretty well puts an end to the matter.
General Grant, I don't think it necessary
But I'm a fighter, sir. I do not spend much thought on these political distinctions.
Yes, I can see you do not. Mr. Lincoln presides over a union of states. President Davis has the disadvantage of trying to administer a confederacy of independent states. Southerners place great store in the rights of states. They consider that since the various states so willingly joined the Union, they could just as willingly remove themselves from the Union.
South Carolina certainly believed it. They were the first to secede and then attacked Fort Sumter to start this war. I've often wondered if they had managed to simply restrain themselves, the two countries might have not been able to coexist.
No, some other hot-headed soul would have been obliged to attack eventually, General. We are a hot-headed people. Yes, they would have been obliged to attack. Although I have to admit, there does seem to be something extraordinary at work in South Carolina. Perhaps it's all that low land. Too many swamps and not enough mountains. Have you ever considered what history will make of us, General?
History? I do not know, sir. The newspapers have not been kind to me. I doubt that the history books will do any better.
I have pondered it sometimes in the lull between battles, lying in my tent at night, listening to the sounds of the camp all around me. You know, it has been said about our revolution against Britain that those were the times that try men's souls.
Certainly that is true of our times.
But we ourselves will be judged in the courts of history, General, and there our destiny decided.
I have read history books. And from what I have read, I suspect students will one day believe you and I fought the whole thing ourselves, single-handedly, man to man.
Oh, yes. Years pass and famous leaders take on almost mythical proportions. Alexander the Great, Hannibal, Julius Caesar, we assumed that they all possessed godlike wisdom and power and uncanny ability, but I'm afraid the answer is much simpler, for you see, they, like us, were just men.
Perhaps. But I think history will remember you as a hero, General Lee. As for myself, I suspect I shall fade into obscurity. I am too simple a man and too simple a soldier to ever wear the robes of a hero.
Do not be too sure, sir.
I would have as much chance to be elected president of these United States as to ever garner more than a footnote in the history books. He won some battles. His men respected him. Still, it is not a bad epithet as epithets go.
President, eh? Well, stranger things have come to pass.
Nothing as strange as that, I assure you. But I think it is time to conclude the business that brings us here to this courthouse. You agree, General?
Yes, by all means. Let's be done with it. I assume you have the papers all drawn up?
All according to the terms that we agreed on in the messages we have exchanged.
May I see them, please?
Here you are, sir.
Thank you. You have kept here to the terms that we have agreed upon. Everything seems to be in order.
To think this war is, at the stroke of a pen, finally over.
You do understand that this surrender only entails the Army of Northern Virginia. I am not empowered to speak for the entire Confederacy. Other forces may continue to fight, regardless of what I say or do here.
General Lee, the Army of the Northern Confederacy is, for all intents and purposes, the Army of the Confederacy. It's the only army left fighting. All other Southern forces amount to a few ragtag outfits in isolated patches.
Yes, of course, you are right. What follows will be a mere afterthought compared to this. It is well that war is so terrible, or we should grow too fond of it. We have a deep wound. I wonder when it will heal. I wonder if it will ever heal.
I did not know that you were wounded, sir.
Not I, General. It is my people who are wounded. Your people are wounded as well, although in victory they may not feel it as sharply. This land, its very bones, have been wounded. Blood makes for poor seed, General Grant, and the crops that spring from these blood-soaked fields will produce bitter fruit, and for how long? Months, years, generations? Who can say?
Not I. I cannot see that far. I can only see today, and maybe the next day, and a little beyond that. And what I see are bells ringing, wives and mothers weeping for joy, children crying to see their fathers returning.
Children will cry for those fathers who do not return as well. And wives and mothers will weep in dark rooms for husbands and sons whom they will never see again. And when the bells have all ceased ringing and all of the prayers of thankfulness have been prayed, I hope that Providence will give us the grace to once again become one people, sir.
I pray it be so.
But it took many years for the war between the states to heal. President Lincoln would have likely insisted that the South be welcomed back into the Union and had worked to overcome the hatred and the passions of war, but he was never given that chance.
Surrender of General Lee's army took place on April the 9th, 1865. 5 days later, on Good Friday, April the 14th, the actor John Wilkes Booth shot and killed President Lincoln in the balcony of the Ford Theater in Washington, D.C.
Vice President Andrew Johnson ascended to the presidency, but he was neither as capable nor as forgiving as Mr. Lincoln. In the years that followed, many Northerners in their victory and took out their anger upon the South.
Martial law and other harsh measures were exacted upon the people of the South. In many cases, their rights were taken away, and penalties and other burdens were placed upon them.
The South was bitter for decades, and it would be many years before they would once again feel like they were part of the United States.
After the war, General Lee served as president of Washington College in Lexington, Virginia. When he retired, they renamed it Washington and Lee College.
He was deeply honored by that.
Although he supported President Andrew Johnson's attempts at Reconstruction, Lee was never formally pardoned for his participation in the war until President Gerald Ford pardoned him over 100 years later.
General Lee actually did become the 18th President of the United States of America in 1869. He served 2 terms, but to be frank, they were met with some scandal. Whiskey may lead to clarity on the battlefield, but in the halls of Washington, they seem to have clouded his judgment considerably.
Grant made some mistakes.
But the United States did eventually overcome the war between the states, the only war ever fought on American soil.
And these separated states did once again become a union, as President Lincoln had insisted they should.
And this government of the people,
by the people, and for the people, shall hopefully never perish from the earth.